I mean, for me, it really it's a both about the consolation of taking seriously one's own experience and other people's experience, and about the fact that it's very hard to orient yourself in the world unless you're willing to look at it honestly, even the difficult things. There's an anecdote. I think in the book I tell it in the second person, like this might have happened to you. Unsurprisingly, it's something that's happened to me. But I remember myself when I in my callow youth dealing with a friend was their kid was having developmental issues, and I immediately went into the mode of saying, "It's going to be fine. Here's what you do." And it was not reassuring at all. It was just a failure to be able to sit with the problem and acknowledge what was happening. It felt like a kind of denial or disavowal. And I think correspondingly, the willingness to acknowledge difficulty is already a kind of consolation that makes us feel less lonely and more connected, even before it gives us the orientation to start to think, how can I cope with this? How can I make the best of what might be a difficult situation?
That's really interesting because you're suggesting that that acknowledgement to ourselves is actually almost the first step to self-compassion. And I think, and that's really interesting because I always have problems with self-compassion, but that view of actually acknowledging it is consoling. Yes, yes, that's wise.
No, I find that myself, and I find that it somehow it is often easier to do these things in relation to someone else than in relation to oneself. At least I don't know if everyone's therapeutic experience is similar to mine, but an enormous amount of effort goes into allowing myself to be as sympathetic to myself as I try to be to other people, and it's something that just it's alarming how unnatural that feels. But yeah, no, I totally agree with you about that.
And you also say in the opening section of the book, a focus on living well rather than happiness. Can you explain that?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a distinction that philosophers often draw using kooky thought experiments, where the point is to distinguish feeling happy as a state of mind from living well as engaging with the world and people around you in emotionally healthy ways. And so the thought experiment philosophers point to is we imagine someone who doesn't know it plugged into a simulation where what they're being fed in the simulation could be absolutely wonderful. And they feel great. They're perfectly happy, but they're not living well. They're barely living a life at all. They're not interacting with other people or reality at all. They're just stuck in the machine. And I think it's very important when we think about what we're aiming for in our own lives to think in terms of living well, not just happiness, in part because when we do that, it opens us out to something that's less self-focused. Because once you start thinking, I want to live well, I want to engage with the world properly, it's not just about how you treat yourself. It is about how you treat other people. And, I mean, I think the same contrast comes out in more kind of down to earth things that people experience, which is, for instance, the unhappiness of grief. That's a case where I think most people will recognize that it's not a kind of unhappiness that's the opposite of living well. It's painful, but it's not as though our lives would be better and richer if we didn't experience the kind of attachment to other people that causes us pain when we lose them. So again, there's just a contrast between, what your state of mind is and whether you're engaged with the world in meaningful ways.